What's going on, guys? Kaigi here. Today we're doing a tier list for PvE in the Flower Fairies. Primarily going to be talking about the mythical ones, but there are two legendary honorable mentions. Above me is the tier list, also on my Discord and the resources channel. It has been posted there as well. This is for PvE. Tomorrow will be PvP. So the two honorable mentions are going to be Anthurium, not so much in PvE. Both of these are primarily PvP ones, but they are ones to mention. All the other ones don't really do a whole lot, but Anthurium has the best healing in the game, besides damage dealt from things like Milim or Mistletoe, and Sunflower is anti-healing, which is a big PvP thing. The other ones aren't really worth mentioning for the most part, besides to Thill and Echo if you're free to play or low spender until you get other stuff going. Now, we're going to work from S and work our way down. This one was a lot easier than the PvP one tomorrow. The PvP one tomorrow is going to have a lot of... It's probably the one that I put it at, but it could be up or down depending on your class, your teammates, things like that. But a good jumping off point, and I'll explain that when we get there. Right now in PvE, we have Twin Lotus. That increases all your damage to monsters. The Holy Echo in itself increases your damage to all enemies. So, I mean, it's just hands down. Now, the second one that's really 1A, 1B. So, Twin Lotus and Gypsophilia, I believe, are two of the better PvE fairies that we have in the game. Just gotta find her. There she is. So, Gypsophilia, her big thing is allowing you to stack your buffs. She will give you buffs, and she also increases the duration of buffs, which will allow you to keep 100% uptime on things like Priest buff or Never Miss, things like this, as well as the cooldown it naturally gives you in longer PvE matches. Even we just had Challenge Milim, which is a PvE boss, and once you get to the higher levels, and you want to do it solo, you can score higher points by having, especially the two that we just talked about. That is it for the Holy. I tried to do it by element. It gets kind of rough to do it this way, but the only one that makes it this high for water is going to be the free one. Where's she at? Lotus. Lotus doesn't really... She does good damage, pulls them in, lets you do your AoE. It just... it's also a very quick animation, so if water... You can make an argument that it's may as well put in A, but if you're doing water elemental realm, I think she's very, very important. Now, for one of the most busted ones we've had in a while, Winter Cherry. Literally, the passive is more so for PvP, but you can have some use for it in PvE, making you immune to knock up and knockbacks and draw effects. Draw effects don't really happen in PvE, but knockups and knockbacks happen with Guild Boss. It happens with Earth Elemental Realm, things like this. And the actual effect, Faded Soulfire, of flame amplification and flammability are super, super powerful. Your guild asks you, what's the element today? Well, if you're using fire, most of the time it's fire day. Because even if you do a rotation thing in Guild Boss where you rotate between 2 to 3, sometimes 4, if you're really on the ball with your rotation of fairy teams, Winter Cherry really allows you to pump up the damage. Now, still on fire, our next one is going to be Anathria. And Anathrina, she does what she needs to do. You don't really care about the weaken effect, which means they can't heal, but you do care about if they're under 40% HP, you deal 80% more damage. This is going to be huge against Guild Boss that spends a lot of time under 40%. What we just said with Milim, big bosses with Path of Fire, things like this, especially when you match it up with Winter Cherry that we just talked about. Even if they're not weak to fire, give them fire weakness, and then Time Sickle, they're probably dead. Then onto Earth, what Incarnation? Big Mommy Carnation. I really love this fairy. It's one of the only ones that we have in the game that has a bonus effect for their basic attack. Deals extra damage to enemies who have been slowed. The more they're slowed, the higher the damage. The biggest slow in the game right now is the grenade toss for not mechanician, armor, that slows by somewhere between 80 and 90%. It doesn't say the amount, but I can tell you from playtesting, up to 100%. So I'm guessing percentage slow equals percentage bonus damage. You may not think that's a big thing, but if you're not switching a bunch, then this is going to do a whole lot more. If you are a switcher, you're probably only going to get 2 or 3 ticks out of this. Also remember that her effect and the Earth passive for having, I think it's level 4 or higher, Echo, is going to slow them as well. Her effect is also a big AoE, black hole, lowers their movement speed. The not being able to dodge doesn't matter, but it does big AoE damage. Really, really great unit. Then we have Foxglove. So their actual ability themselves isn't actually going to do a whole lot besides just some damage, but what she really brings is the Hinduism passive, which gives you extra crit rate when you get a shield. It gives you a shield, so crit rate is still crit rate, 5% OL. It could be in your rotation of fairies. You rotate, you drop the fists with the skill, you get a 5% crit buff, you keep it swapping. Especially, as we said with Gypsophilia, she's on your rotation as well, so you get to keep this extra 5%. If you have enough cooldown reduction and enough uptime on your rotation, you will have, I think, let me see, if you're doing 3 fairy rotations, you should have a 66% uptime. Because of Gypsophilia keeping it going. Not all effects will keep going with Gypsophilia, but they will last way longer, and then you get back around to the time to cast them again. It all works out. Next one is one of the coolest fairies we've ever had, Dandelion. Now, Dandelion, if you don't know, her skill gives you pierce, does damage, but it also hits up to 6 times. And every time it hits, it does more damage, up to 5 times. Now, here's the thing that matters. At level 4, it changes what it does based off the element that you used last. In the top right-hand corner of Dandelion, it'll have the elemental affinity symbol showing you which one's going to happen. As we see it right here, fire deals more damage, increases your crit rate for 8 seconds. This can be full rotation, but that means you have to be in a weird spot where you have fire right before this, and it's tough to correlate in that way. But you can have 100% uptime with this with the Gypsophilia if you have the swaps right. Water makes it heal, gives you HP steal rate. Wind gives you pierce, which isn't PvE. Earth gives you damage reduction and get a shield. Holy does the holy effect of turn off their dodge and increase your attack by 15%. This is also 8 seconds, and this can also be on rotation with Gypsophilia. Going on into A tier, we have Rimuru. So Rimuru is a jack of all traits kind of character. The boss isn't really going, whatever you're doing isn't really going to have buffs that you're stealing, but you will be putting on debuffs on them, as well as just the basic attacks going to do debuffs. Rimuru is definitely not the greatest, which is why it's not S, but it's definitely worth bringing in your rotation as an A. Then we have Laurel, which doesn't do anything besides damage. But it does do damage. I did a video a while ago, Laurel versus Twin Lotus, of their damage output, and you'll see the results in that video. But Laurel does big damage, has a fast animation, but it doesn't do enough damage to make it S tier. We're pretty much the same conversation when we talk about Sakura. Sakura does really good damage, quick animation, but it gives you pierce rate, which does not help much in PvE. Then we make it to our water, which Viola has a good AoE, does the Flake Ice. Her basic attack procs Flake Ice as well. Reduced movement speed doesn't matter much, but it does good damage. And then the Falling Star, the active, eats all the stacks to do more damage. You wouldn't think it, but one of the Gen 1 fairies, Chestnut, actually holds up a little bit nowadays. And that's because once hit grants character Searing Blade effect, increases damage to fire monster by 20% for 6 seconds. Now, this is a wording issue, translation issue, whatever it is. It's bonus damage to fire weakness. So Burning Heart is very powerful. It will definitely help you, but not as much as the other two fire fairies that we talked about previously. It would be a good one to have on your rotation. You have those two on one, and then you have these two on the other, and then you 1-2 swap 1-2. Primarily, Chestnut. Sorry, you want to. Okay. You should have a Winter Cherry and Chestnut Rose on the same team. Set their bonus damage up. Swap Ixoria into Anathria. Go for the kill. Talking about Ixoria, tons of buffs. The basic doesn't do anything, but Dragon's Blood, lose HP to gain attack, which is going to be a bunch of damage. Just buff yourself up and then go for the kill with Anathria. Then Wind, we have Balloon Flower. Basic doesn't do anything. Ability right here. So pulls them all in. The thing that people don't really talk about with Balloon Flower is reduced defense by 20%. It's only 3 seconds, but if you time some powerful hits within that window, it can definitely do some monstrous hits even in PvE. We're going to go over to Hyracanthe, which, basic doesn't do anything, but so it gives us pierce rate, which isn't a big thing for PvE, but it does give us that 8% cooldown reduction, which is going to be really good in our rotation when it's a wind day, when we're doing our rotation for certain bosses, certain levels of Path of Fire, things like this. Then we go to the last one, one of the newer fairies, Eldewis or Eldewise. So if we take a look, basic, doesn't do anything. Passive, crit immunity, doesn't matter. Chance to immobilize, doesn't matter. But your putting the poison for hallucination. So the enemies can't get a buff. As I said, the bosses don't really get many buffs. But you deal 100% of your attack every second, which scales up. It ends up being every 0.8 seconds, as well as increases the chance of it triggering, doing a bleed effect, as we'll see when we talk about Rose. Then one of the best PvP fairies, but holds up a little bit, which is why it's in the top of B tier. When you look at the damage of Licorice, it doesn't look like a lot, but it says it hits 6 times. PvE, they're not really dodging you. You're going to do your damage. Now, also another monster in PvP, Millum, which does an AoE when you swap, which increases Flower Fairy or Companion damage by 3%. You can make the argument that she should be an A tier just because of this. You can have her in any of your teams and just increase damage by Flower Fairies, but it is 6 seconds. It's tough to keep up. You're putting it on them, so it's tough to keep in the rotation because it's 30 seconds, only 6 seconds of it. So 20% uptime isn't huge, but you can do it once every 30 seconds, as we see right there. But the damage itself gives you an attack boost for 6 seconds, which is also really good. Yeah, you can probably make the argument that she could be an A tier if you, depending on your class, but I think she's new enough that I'm still not sure. She's either top of B tier where she is, or in the A tier. It's one of those plus or minus depending on use. Then we go on to water. Where are you at? Hydro right here. Increases your defense, which can also increase your attack depending on your class, such as Mechanician or Berserker. Does good damage. It does a stun, which doesn't really matter much in PvE unless it's the dragon boss, which is Earth Elemental Realm, or we can have that in some of our boss battles. But that's it. Just a huge defense boost, a good AoE, and just that's why it's just a solid B tier unit. Then we have 1A, 1B for fire, and that is going to be Rose and Diablo. I say Rose is right above that. Wait a second. Yeah, there we go. Basic, not much. Now, both of them are going to silence. This does it does the poison of heat, which also does a bleed, a damage over time, which makes it do more damage, and the flat damage is a little bit more. Then we have Diablo, who does a good AoE, and his basic. The reason why his basic is faster than all the other fairies from what I've seen is, as we see from pretty much anyone else, AoE damage right there, whereas his is single target. But he does good damage. Then we're on to Earth. Daisy right here. So as we see AoE, no actual effect. Decent damage, and taunt. Taunt doesn't work the same way that taunt works in other games, where it forces them to attack you, but you counterattack them if they don't attack you, and that can be some good bonus damage. But that's primarily a PvP style effect. It doesn't really work well in PvE because you're generally the only target. Then we have Marigold, who just does good, decent damage. Very similar to what we talked about with Chestnut, which increases the damage they receive Earth weakness enemies by 30%. which is really powerful. It's just a pretty slow skill. So while you could say, well, it's the same thing as Chestnut, Chestnut deals more and does it faster. So just does better in content. Especially since we have Winter Cherry that can make anything weak to fire. So Chestnut just generally does better. Then we have the C tier Mistletoe, heals you when it attacks, which is always nice. AoE heals you, barrier, damage. If they try to go through it, you can set up things where you put up the barrier, walk away, make the boss walk through it, but the extra damage just doesn't add up. Then we have water. We have this issue where all of the like top PvP units aren't that great in PvE. So right here, switch, do damage, get rid of, make you immune to control effects, which doesn't really matter in PvE, but that extra damage when you swap is pretty nice. Phantom Sea Melody does good damage, but the movement speed part isn't really going to matter. Then we have, where's she at? Primrose, also good PvP unit. Stun, increased damage reduction. Doesn't really matter. PvE, generally, you're not really dying unless you're so underpowered for a Path of Fire stage that it just doesn't really matter. Then the D tier, Candok. AoE heal, which, I mean, a heal can be nice, but it, out of the healing fairies, it heals pretty low, and that's because it heals AoE, and that's generally not needed in PvE. Then we have, yet again, one of the stronger PvP units being really low in PvE. Slumber, increase the damage they receive by 15%, but once you deal a certain amount of damage, it puts them out of slumber. Will end and the target will receive extra damage equal to 6% of your attack, which is nice, but generally it's a lot better in PvP. Last and probably least in PvE is Camellia. Just bam, does damage. It would be really nice if she had a damage amp effect like Chestnut does, seeing as they're both Gen 1 fairies, but just doesn't. Let me know what you guys think for PvE down below, and like I said, tomorrow is going to be PvP. Till next time.